Hello everybody and welcome. A while ago I made a video about engraving pet portraits, and I did an engraving of a little dog. And in that video I mentioned that engraving dark coloured animals, black, very dark tones, is very difficult. Now that's a comment that's come up a few times from people looking for some advice on how to go about engraving dark subjects. So that's what I'm going to cover in this video. Specifically, I will be doing another pet portrait of my little Cocker Spaniel Lily, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Now, Lily is obviously not completely black. She was a blue roan, so she has some white bits, but what I'll focus on in this video is engraving the dark areas round about her head. I have a piece of glass cut, ready to go, so let's just get off and do that. Normally, what I do when I'm doing an engraving is I'll transfer the picture onto the glass just with a Sharpie pen or something like that, but I was obviously feeling a bit lazy this day, and all I've done is I have stuck the picture behind the piece of glass, and I'm going over it now with a middle-sized spherical burr, looking for the edges of things and the lighter parts of things. It's important when you are copying out your drawing onto your glass to remember that bits you want to be outlining and copying are the light coloured bits. We all grew up learning how to draw with graphite pencils, so we're used to drawing the dark lines, and I think that causes a lot of problems for people who tend to look at dark bits and think that's the bit I need to draw, but it's not. It's definitely the white bits. And what I'm doing is going over the picture and looking for all of the little highlights. Her ears were quite curly, so there's a lot of little highlighted areas within that. And I've changed now to a rat's tail burr, and I'm looking at the very white areas around about her eye. Again, very carefully drawing the white bits and not drawing this black outline of her eye. There's quite a few little white bits around here, as well as the little white dots in her eye, which make it begin to come alive. And same for the other little eye, although you don't see that nearly so well in the picture. Once I have all of the highlights in, it's time to start looking at the blacker parts of the face. And most of these bits are not going to be engraved at all. All I'm doing is taking a polishing rubber over them to slightly roughen the surface to make it look as if something has been done to it, rather than just that I've forgotten to engrave a piece on the glass. Now, although this is quite a soft polishing rubber, it will just produce a little bit of a bloom. The glass is not quite so dark after we've engraved it as it was before. And even although it's making very few, very light marks on the glass, I'm still careful to follow the natural contours of the face or the natural line that the fur is lying in, because although you can't see those as we're working on them, they can sometimes be apparent in the final engraving, so it's worth taking your time not to just randomly go over the surface with the polishing rubber, but to follow the natural contours and lines on the face. With most of the face done, I continue that process into the dark parts underneath the chin, right down the front of the dog. Just the same process, running over it and following the line that the fur would fall in. And then once that's all done, I'll continue this process over the area of the ears as well. Now what I've done is I've changed to a white stone. This is not a white Arkansas stone, it's some kind of aluminium oxide, I think. It is not as smooth as a white Arkansas stone, but it's much smoother than a green stone. See? So I'm hoping that if I go over these areas on her face where there is a slight sheen, that I can then polish these back to give me a half tone which gives the sheen and the shape of the face without making it too white. There are quite a lot of areas on the face which, although her face was black here, because of the way the light hits it, there is a shine to it. So this white stone gives me a basis on which I can then come back, but this is quite a soft grey polishing rubber. So I can come back and polish that back to give me the half tone, the little darker tone that I'm looking for to illustrate the sheen on her face. And there are other areas round about her nose which can be quite dark, so they need a little bit of attention. This little bullet-shaped rubber comes in very handy because it has just enough of a point on it to make it manageable. And then, of course, I'm doing what I always do whenever I am engraving an animal, something with fur, is I find it's a very iterative process. I'll go over it with a stone and make it lighter, and then go back with a rubber and make it darker again, and keep repeating that process until I have the texture and the tone in the fur that I'm trying to get to. So having gone over it with a little white stone, of course, I then have to come back with the rubber again and work that back down to give me the darker tone that I'm looking for. The highlights I've been putting in up to now are mainly little half tones, but there are one or two areas where there's a lot of shine in her hair, along the top of her head or at the top of some individual little curls. So I've changed to a little rat tail bar here, and I'm carefully looking at the picture, trying to find the very whitest areas where the light's catching her fur and making it shine. And the rat's tail bar will hopefully let me pick those out. And while I have that, I'm also going over some of the little white areas, making sure that I have some of the texture in there that I'm trying to get to. And of course, yet again, back with a polisher. This one is a slightly different one. This one is a green one that I have, which isn't quite as soft as the grey one, and it's leaving again a little bit of bloom, so it's adding a slightly different tone into parts of the ear where the light is catching it and it's not as black looking as other parts. So combining different types of stones and different types of rubbers, you can get quite a lot of tonal variation, although the background colour is still the black. And with those bits polished out, it's time to really work on the white areas of fur. The whiter I can get those, the blacker the other parts of our fur will look. So I have quite a large spherical diamond bar here. It doesn't need to be it's not a very pernickety process, it's not a very fussy process. Just trying to get some texture and show some of the whiter bits, because even in the white areas there are darker bits in between, and I need to make sure I leave those so that they still show. And there's always the last little bit of tidying up to do. I've got a very little black polishing rubber here, just looking for areas where I can maybe bring in a little more dark tone into it. And honestly, you could do that for hours and hours going over it, but at some point you have to decide it's just finished. And with the portrait mounted up here, hopefully you can see the finished article. The white areas on her face and round on her back, really, I suppose, help to make the black areas look blacker. So the highlights on the top of the head and in amongst the fur are the bits that make the rest of the fur look black, as well as giving her form. Now, there may be times when there isn't a highlight where you need there to be one, if you're trying to make the shape look correct. So sometimes you might have to make up the odd highlight, but I would suggest you do that as little as possible because you want to stay as natural looking as possible. Anyway, that's the process I use if I am engraving a black or a dark coloured animal or thing. You could use the same process if it was a black coloured item. You must always look for the areas of highlight and use those highlights to make the black colour show up. Anyway, I hope that you will find this useful. I will leave you now to go and practice your engraving, and I wish you luck.